All right, turn to your notes, please. So we're going to finish up here. So we already talked about pollination, the purpose of pollination. We talked about both male and female reproductive structures that you find in flowers. So seeds are what form after pollination is taking place. Once pollen has landed on the stigma of the pistil, a sperm cell travels down the style into the ovary, into the ovule. It fertilizes the ovule, and then fertilization is taking place. And the first cells that are going to become the seed form. And those cells divide, just like in a human embryo. After an egg cell is fertilized by a sperm cell, that fertilized egg starts to divide and grow into a small embryo. It develops over time. Same sort of thing happens in plants. Although what forms, we call it a seed. Inside of an actual seed are a few different parts. Okay? There's the embryo that is basically a tiny little baby plant. Most of the seed is actually this food storage. It is stored up carbohydrates and proteins and fats, energy, that this embryo is going to use as it starts to grow. Because typically, how do plants get their energy? Through photosynthesis. However, while this plant is starting to grow, it's not going to be able to go through photosynthesis immediately, okay, as it emerges from the seed. So the energy it's going to use during that time comes from this stored up energy. So the seed itself is the mature fertilized ovule. And typically they form inside of fruits. So we know that sort of the definition of a fruit. You can identify a fruit that has seeds in it, it's a fruit. Excuse me? You could. Depends on, it has to have. So seed, we'll talk about germination in a minute. I'll talk more about it. Yeah. Inside of the seed, there's the embryo, tiny little plant. And then there's the food supply, which is most of the inside. It's all surrounded by a thin sort of outer covering, the seed coat, helps protect the seed. Yeah, so mostly, so yeah, if you imagine a peanut, like one single peanut, okay, so the peanut in its shell is the fruit. If you open up the fruit, you have inside of it, maybe two seeds. Okay? The outer, if you get whole peanuts in their shell, the outer, like very thin, papery layer, like it's red usually, that's the seed coat. The part you actually eat is what? Most of it is this starchy substance. But if you break apart a peanut, it goes into two halves. Yeah. And then there's also that little extra section, the small extra section, you know what I mean? Yeah. That is the embryo. Now that seed's been dried out, so it's no longer alive and viable, but that's what those parts of the peanut actually are. They're the starch stored up, and there's the little plant in there and the seed coat and the fruit. What's that? They grow on trees. Really? Yeah. But they're actually a legume, technically. All right, so let's talk about how they grow. So, once a seed has arrived at some environment that is sort of conducive to its growth, it will start to grow. That process is called germination, when a seed starts to grow. And it requires certain conditions, requires certain materials. So for a seed to germinate, what must it have? Like, why aren't the peanuts, if you had some peanuts, or why aren't they growing? Or why isn't the seeds in my apple growing right now? Yeah, they need several things. They need water. Water helps to activate the starch inside of the seed so it can start to be broken down and actually used by the plant. They need oxygen as well. Because what process are they going to use to make energy to grow? No. Respiration, which requires oxygen. And they need a certain temperature to activate the enzymes, so the enzymes work effectively. They do not need soil. So you can germinate, if you take a piece of wet paper towel and put some, let's say, radish seeds in it, fold it up, put it in the dark, those seeds will germinate, even though there's no light, even though there's no soil, because it has all of the things it needs. It has moisture from that wet paper towel, okay? It has oxygen, and it has a proper temperature. Seeds will germinate without soil. So here you see like different stages in seed germination. Once the, do I have another slide with the, so once the seed gets wet, the seed coat sort of softens up. The plant starts to grow a root into the soil, and the shell sort of breaks open. The starch inside of the seed, the stored up food, starts to be broken down, and the plant starts using that energy to grow larger. It grows the roots down, starts to grow, and then eventually emerges from the soil. Its leaves start to open up, and once these leaves have opened up fully, then photosynthesis can begin, and it can begin to grow even larger. It stops relying on the energy from the seed because it's been used up. Question, Jack?
So what is it like for when they like hybrids, like plants when they're hybrids? How does that work? Because if like the seeds they're like exactly the same, so how is there
Well, they're
like?
not. So for example, if you have two tomato plants that you're growing in your backyard, and one of these tomato plants, you got them from different places. One produces really, really sweet tomatoes, really delicious tomatoes. But maybe it's vulnerable to a fungus. Then you have over here another tomato plant, which its tomatoes aren't as good, but it's not affected by the fungus. If you take pollen from the flower of one of those tomato plants and rush it on the stigma of the other plant, you are being the pollinator, right? And then, when that pollen fertilizes the ovule in that other tomato plant, that tomato plant will have a mixture of traits from both of those tomatoes. You know, and maybe it might have the characteristics you were looking for, the sweet tomatoes, but also the resistance to the fungus. And so, then when you grow that seed, maybe it's going to provide a tomato plant that has both of those characteristics. So, because we have cross-pollination going on, we're mixing the traits from each parent. What? It'll run, once it uses up the energy in the starch after a few days, it won't survive unless its leaves can start going through photosynthesis. Yeah, then it will lose life. Jake?
So if you like put one like in a bad ones and you put it in soil, so if you get the bad like traits, does that spread with the other ones?
Not necessarily. It might. It depends if they were pollinating each other. It could. So it depends on sort of the situation. Mitchell?
What if we put like a straw for like a strawberry plant nectar and like an apple tree nectar?
So plants are just like animals in that you can't have a corn plant pollinate a pine tree or a tomato plant. Just like in animals, they have to be the same species. So corn plants only pollinate other corn plants, and white pine trees only pollinate other white pine trees, and so on. So they have to be the same species for that to happen. Maddie?
Wait, has there ever been like a mixture, like you know how like some animals?
A hybrid?
Yeah, like a
So,
corn and apple.
yeah, hybrids can happen, hybridization, but again, just like in animals, they have to be closely related species. So you can't have like, you will never have a corn plant pollinate a pine tree, but you might have two different types of corn plants that are not exactly the same species could cross pollinate. I don't know, depends on the random combination of traits that were in those. What? No. No, they have to be the same species. All right, Devin. Yeah, so like two close related bears might be able to produce a hybrid. Will. Yeah, so usually those offspring are not fertile. They can't reproduce themselves. Jack?
So is someone like a normal seed, like there's like obviously the source, but what makes them like different other than what they grow? Like,
From one seed to the other?
yeah.
So the genes, so in that little embryo, it has certain genes, certain characteristics, certain chromosomes and DNA, just like you have different DNA than I do, and that's what makes us different. Same thing with those seeds. They have different DNA because they came from different parents, different combinations of chromosomes.
Cats and dogs close enough?
No. All right, I'm gonna show you these couple videos here. They're also time lapse.